Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. If there's anyone here who'd like to speak to the board, there are forms there by the doorway. You can fill that out, please, and give it to Mr. Castater. Okay? Mr. Castater, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Gunther? Present. Mr. Beckman? Here. Mr. Kleinfelder? Present. Mr. Young?
Here.
Mrs. Webb is absent.
Mrs. Webb is out of town, so she won't be here this evening. Yeah. Okay, would everyone please stand and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Dr. Rice, would you like to review the agenda for us?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Young. Action-packed agenda tonight. The 5-year forecast is the highlight of the evening. I think that's why we have a packed audience tonight. We'll get through some board business before that, including the approval of agenda, review, and correction of minutes. We have several items to discuss, including another set of policy, our book study, and then I do have a request to name an appeal representative for the board. After we get through several of those items, we do have numerous things to vote on. We need board action on, including some overnight field trip proposals and some policy that we read last time. And then just a short portion for personnel before we turn it over to our treasurer for the treasurer's report.
Yep. Got several items tonight. Our normal monthly reports, donations, investments, and our cash summary and general fund report. 4 additional items: the creation of a new cash account, contract for a new host website management company that we'll be moving forward with starting in January. After the presentation of the forecast, we'll approve the forecast so I can upload it to the state tomorrow to the Department of Education, and also the district mowing services contract on the agenda tonight for approval.
Great. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
We have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we call the vote.
Yes. Mr. Kleinfelder?
Aye.
Mr. Beckman?
Yes.
Mr. Gunther?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes. Agenda's approved. We have a copy of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, we call the roll, please.
Yes. Mr. Beckman?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelder?
Yes.
Mr. Gunther?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes. Just for the information of those here this evening, since we have a few new people, the board receives a packet prior to the meeting which has all the items that we're going to be talking about and voting on. So we've already been able to look it over. So we've already looked through the minutes, so we didn't need to do, read through them. So FYI. Okay? All right, let's go to our items for board discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Young. The first item I have under letter A is our policy. There are 12 pieces of policy that I would like to review and discuss this evening. We'll start with policy ACC. This is a political commitments. This is a new policy for school boards. This new provision prohibits soliciting or requiring employees, applicants for employment, and applicants for academic admission to affirmatively ascribe to or even opine about specific beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles concerning political movements or ideologies. That's policy ACC. Please let me know if you have any questions on that. Policy BDDG, minutes revision. This is a simple word change for when minutes are approved. Instead of using the word next succeeding, it is now next regular board meeting. Please let me know if you have any questions on that policy. Next policy is DJC, bidding requirements revisions. This covers the contract bidding process for school districts. Next policy is policy DM, deposits of public funds, cash collection points. This is a revision. This further clarifies an earlier policy change stating that there must be a cash gate at each event. This part states that different prices cannot be charged for cash tickets. So maybe somebody was doing that. It's policy DM. The next several policies I have all deal with the Auditor of State and fraud. That's policy EBBA. I'm jumping ahead. EBBA is a first aid revision. I jumped ahead there, my apologies. This deals with AEDs. They need to be marked and in all locations where there are students participating, and there need to be training with staff, and we are compliant on that one already. Now, where I tried to jump ahead to are the fraud ones. EBCE, which is a revision. EBCE-E, which is a new policy. EBCE-E1 and EBCE-E2 are both going away. And then EBCER, a regulation, is a revision. We should have had EBCER already, but that was another one that I found that we should be revising tonight, but we actually hadn't had it as a policy or regulation prior to tonight, so we're going to read that whole policy. This is protecting and reporting safety and fraud violations, otherwise known as whistleblowers. House Bill 33 and Senate Bill 91 solidified districts' obligations related to fraud reporting. The Auditor of State released a Bulletin 24/2025, which includes guidance on these new requirements and new Auditor of State trainings and forums. You've had to participate in those trainings, all of our staff members, all of our coaches, everyone has had to participate in those trainings. These policies and regulations meet those requirements. So there are several policies that we touched with those requirements. Any questions on anything having to do with fraud? And the last two I have for this evening are IGD and IGDJ, co-curricular and extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletics revisions. This goes back to when you think about House Bill 33 and we changed home education from homeschooling, or we changed it to home education from homeschooling. This removes the requirement for academic requirements for those students that are residents being home taught to participate in sporting events for their home district. So again, it's just a simple cross out of academic for both of those two policies. Any questions over any of the policies this evening?
No.
Those will be before us at the next board meeting to vote on then.
Right. So just to update people who may not be aware of what's going on, as Dr. Rice came on board as our superintendent, he found that we had a number of policies that needed to be revised, and the state made a lot of changes. So we've been trying to revise about 12 policies at each meeting. So basically, we go over the policies at a meeting, and we vote on them the following month. So if anybody has any questions, those can be answered prior to us voting on those. So we'll be voting on the 12 we went over last month. We'll be voting on those later in the meeting.
Yes, sir. Next item I have for the board discussion is the book study. So this is the first time that we're participating in this. Last Friday, we had our whole district team together. There were about 20 of us, and we went through the first third of this book for the public. This book that we're studying this year is Solve Employee Problems Before They Start. Everyone will laugh at me as I say this again, but it's not the best title in the world. But it's from an HR standpoint. It is dealing with the ability to have difficult conversations, challenging conversations, by taking the emotion out of it. So again, the district team is participating in this as well as the board. We did this exact process last Friday and went very, very well. People seem to be responding very, very well to it. So I would just like to lead the board. I hope you have had an opportunity to read roughly the first 90 pages so far this year, and just kind of leave it up there. We asked the district team what were some takeaways, key takeaways, and then I asked them specifically how it's changed their job, how it's changed their leadership style. Have they put any of these principles to practice right now? So I'll just leave it up to you guys and see where the conversation leads us.
Well, I guess one thing that I was interested in this was the whole physiological information in here about how the brain works and how your first thing that comes to your mind is the fight or flight. And then you have to have some time to actually overcome the fight or flight when you face conflict, and actually take time for the other part of the brain to kick in and actually think through it a little bit. And I thought that was pretty good. I mean, it goes back to the old Covey's thing about knowing whether something's urgent or important and taking time to make important decisions. That kind of struck me.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy, the first part of it on the biology behind the
Yeah.
brain and, you know, the different parts of the brain and why you react the way you do to certain things. So I promise it'll get a little less biology as we move along. But yeah, those were some of the things that we talked about. The ability to take 5 seconds before you say something. If you say something within 5 seconds, it's probably going to be a reactionary, emotional statement. So being able to pause for a little bit before you say something. I shared with them when I was a high school principal, I knew I was going to have a difficult conversation with an employee, and I knew from past experience the employee was going to do everything in their power to get us off topic. So I actually had written down bullet points of what I needed to say, and as I felt my face getting red there, and I just kept going back and looking at those bullet points, and then we actually gave to, Emily and I were in a session together at Capitol. We gave them, it was called Critical Conversations. It's actually like a little bit of a playbook where you can map out before you have to have these difficult conversations, what are your talking points and how are you going to respond and those sorts of things. So you can kind of get your mind set, trying to take that emotion out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the book talks a lot about, you know, emotional intelligence, and, you know, everybody's heard of an IQ. You can take an IQ test. It's very quantitative. You can ask a question. It's either right or wrong. And years ago, I remember reading about it. And the funny part was, before I read this book, before I got my new job, I told my boss, I said, your EQ is very low. He's like, well, what's that? Not realizing what I was saying at the time. But fast forward to this year with my new job, one of the things I had to do was basically go get, I'll call it a psych evaluation, but they do an IQ test and an EQ test. And we actually use that in my new job, but we hire all different kinds of people, and part of it is an EQ portion of it, you know, to see if they're going to fit within our organization. So even before the person's hired, they actually have to go see this company down in Cincinnati who's impartial. I mean, it's not a, you know, I mean, obviously we pay them, but, you know, they give us a fit, and that they know who we are and what the group is, and they tell us, you know, give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, not only based on IQ, but EQ. So, you know, fast forward to this book, when I'm sitting there reading it, it really kind of, you know, helps solidify, you know, some of the statistics on, you know, what makes a good leader. You know, it's not a manager of people, it's a leader, it's someone who is, you know, able to feel what, or, you know, sense how other people are reacting, how other people are being treated, and treating them with the same respect that they should be getting. But I take a look at that, and I don't know about you guys, but when I was reading the book, you could definitely pick out, that describes one of my bosses, good or bad.
Yeah.
And,
Right. Yeah.
you know, I think in the book, the statistic was, you know, 90% of the good bosses actually had a high EQ, but the IQ had a very low portion to do with it. If you accelerate, was it GM that took all the really smart people and made them leaders? And I think everybody knows where GM is right now, but bad decisions were made. So, you know, good organizations have to be surrounded by people who have a good EQ and know how to recognize it and control it. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably what the book's going to get into later is, yeah, we can recognize people who may need a little softening around the edges to be able to be, you know, communicative, but, you know, dealing with it and controlling it, I think is kind of the next biggest ticket item.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, you know, I've always said that, you know, there's a difference between a leader and a manager. You know, one person's just has the title, the other person is proactively thinking, they're planning. You know, kind of to your point earlier, you said, you know, you sat down, kind of had your bullet points listed out to kind of guide the conversation so that it didn't get off topic, you weren't caught off guard. You know, and I think that's very important. You know, just a manager, you know, they typically react to the situation. They don't have have time to plan, and then that's what differentiates, I think, a good leader. You know, being able to give it that, you know, if you have to stop, like you said, take 5 seconds and think about it. take that 5 seconds. Don't just react, because that's going to set the tone for the rest of the conversation or the rest of the agenda.
I will say, based off of Greg's statement, how physiology, one of the things in it was that as you get later in the day, your brain builds up with the cortisol, and that's
Yeah.
what kind of takes down that barrier of that impulse saying. And I remember, I did just know later in my personal life at night, between my wife and I, it's like, oh, that's why I am the way I am. It's like, see, I told her, I was like, it's not my fault, it's science.
There you go. We actually, several members of the team talked about that, how they try to push difficult conversations to the end of the day, and they think they're doing everyone a favor. Like, then you could decompress when you go home, but, this actually tells us, you should probably start with those, because you're most kind of charged and ready to go for those conversations then. So, yeah, good points.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the emotional quotient part of it reminded me when I first got hired at a school district, my first administrative job, they made everybody take the perceiver test, and then they also made everybody take the Myers-Briggs test. So much so that all the teachers outside their door had their 4-letter code, whether they're introverted or extroverted or whatever. And I thought, what the heck am I getting myself into here? Not being that touchy-feely person myself, but it really kind of, as I went through the first year in administration, it was all a blur, but it really helped you see when you saw their personality type or what they had scored on the perceiver and where they were thinking with kids. A lot of things they did made sense. It didn't always agree with what I was thinking, but it did make sense where they were coming from. And, you weren't going to get an introverted person to step out in front of the faculty and do something or whatever necessarily all the time. It's pushed, but that wasn't their comfort zone, and you kind of started maybe in a bad way, it pigeonholed people a little bit in some people's minds, but it was very interesting how often that actually played out to what they were doing on a daily basis, and kind of opened my eyes to some things. But
Well, the thing was that they also mentioned in there that when they're giving those tests, the emotional intelligence test, that you can score high in assertiveness as long as that's offset by a high score in empathy and the other relationship skills.
Right.
So it's not like they're saying you can't be assertive and be a good leader, but you have to have that balanced with empathy and relationship skills when you're dealing with your people as
Right.
well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
That was, I thought, interesting too.
Well, thank you, everyone. At least you're humoring me by doing the book study, so I'll take that. So, thank you. So we'll do about another third, and I think it's February-ish is when the next third is due. So thank you on that. Last item I have for board discussion this evening is item C, and we'll actually, after discussion, have an opportunity to vote on this later this evening. We need an expulsion appeal Board of Education designee. So I've put on there either a representative from Ennis and Britton and/or Butler County Educational Service Center. I've spoken with both of those entities. Just speaking open and honestly, we do have one expulsion that I have heard as the expulsion officer that they are appealing. So I need somebody that is a third party to hear that appeal process. So if there's any discussion, please ask now, and then later on this evening, I'll ask you to vote on that.
Something I thought of was at the organizational meeting, don't we, at that time, we appoint somebody, pretty sure we appoint somebody to hear suspension appeals. Did we appoint anybody at that time for expulsion appeals?
Well, I would be the person that would hear a suspension appeal because I haven't heard the case to begin with. The expulsion, as the expulsion officer, there's no one other than me unless we were to bring them in front of the board, and I wanted to avoid that.
Is that something we should be doing at the
Potentially could-
organizational meeting? We should be,
We could do this every year at the
naming
organizational.
somebody at the organizational meeting to do the expulsion
Yeah.
appeals.
Yeah.
So
That's
right.
easy enough.
Just need to add that
Yeah.
to the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
For the, if we decide to go with Butler County, I mean, are there lawyers that are involved in that? I mean, it seems like what the two entities, I mean, what's the advantages of going with one versus the other? Is there-
There's really no advantage. Anderson Britton actually would not be an attorney. It would be a former administrator that they have in their firm that does this specifically. Same thing with Butler County ESC. I've already spoken with Chris Brown. He has a former superintendent that would overhear. And I think Mr. Young actually did that at one time for Butler County ESC.
Right, right.
Okay.
After I retired, I worked for the ESC, and I did expulsion appeals. Just went to a district and heard both parties, and then I made the decision, whether they would be expelled or not.
Thank you. That's all I have for items for board discussion this evening.
All right. I believe that takes us to the 5-year forecast presentation. Mr. Castater? For the knowledge of those in the audience, there's some people that haven't probably been through this before. Twice a year, the district's required by state law to do what's called a 5-year forecast. And so we have to project into the future, basically our budget, what will be coming in, what will be going out, and so forth. So we have to do that in November and in May. So this is the 5-year forecast in November.
That's correct. So we'll jump right in. I've actually got a couple background pieces of information here. So the 5-year forecast provides 3 years of actual numbers in history. So we're going to look at the final numbers from 2022 through 2024, and then 5 years of projections beginning with this fiscal year, which is fiscal 25 through fiscal 29. The next two bullet points kind of go together here. It is a long-range planning tool. However, it's also a snapshot report based on a lot of assumptions. So it is based on the information as we know it right now. I guarantee that information, it may even change by the end of this meeting. So there are a lot of moving parts in the 5-year forecast, and we'll talk through some of the challenges of trying to project out several years in advance when we don't necessarily have all the information we need to make those projections or decisions. And as Mr. Young mentioned, it is a legal requirement. We submit an approved 5-year forecast to the Department of Education in November and May of each year. They do review those forecasts, and if you're showing a deficit in cash and a couple of years out, then you kind of go down the road of being under fiscal watch or the fiscal process through the state of Ohio. Fortunately for us, I have good news to present tonight, and we are not in that position. So we'll talk through some of the numbers, but our forecast is in good shape here as we move forward. Break this down into 3 parts tonight. So we're going to look at the revenue side of things first, and then we'll go to the expenditure side, and then at the end we'll tie it all together with a comparison of where our revenue and expenses are and what that means for our ending cash balance. The ending cash balance is the number that people traditionally look at to see the overall financial health of a district. We'll talk about why that's important, and the best way to think about the cash balance is kind of like your savings account. That's the money that you carry over from year to year. So if you get into an emergency, you get into some type of crunch or difficult situation, you have that cash balance to dip into to be able to cover expenses that may come up. Starting here with our revenue summary, I've highlighted, again, fiscal 25, the year that we're currently in. Start with these are our primary sources of revenue over here on the left. And these line items, these numbers just align with what is in the actual forecast file that's submitted to the state. So as you can see, a couple primary sources of revenue that we have. First, in the 1.010, general property tax. So that's the property tax that comes in from Butler County generally twice a year. That is a total of about $10.2 million in revenue. I will show you that as you go back into last year and especially into the last couple fiscal years in 22 and 23, you can see that has increased dramatically from $7.5 million just 2 years ago to a little over $10 million this year. And that is due to the triennial update that happened in tax year 23 with the property valuation. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. The second line here, 1.020, it's called a PUP tax, public utility tax. We're projected to bring in a little over $2 million in that tax this year, and you can see that's significantly higher than what we've received in the last several years. That is due to a settlement from the Rockies pipeline, which runs through our school district. They appealed some taxes, and there's some delinquent back tax that they owe us. So that is why those payments are projected to come in during 2025. We've already received one of them. We're anticipating getting another one in the spring, and that's why that number kind of jumps a little bit for next year and then levels off as you move forward into the additional 4 years of the forecast. Our earned income tax, line 1.030, you can see that's about $6.5 million of revenue for us every single year. That's continued to grow at a rate of 2 to 3% every year, and we're hoping and anticipating that growth, while a little bit slow, still continues moving forward. The last two lines, 3.5 and 4.0 here, go together. That is our state funding. So those two things together are unrestricted as kind of our core foundation funding that we get from the state. And then they throw in some additional dollars that are restricted, about $760,000. That's our funding for gifted services, our funding for student wellness and success, which we use to pay for counselors and school resource officers, things like that. So those are very specific. They're essentially, we're going to give you the money, but we're going to tell you exactly what you have to spend it on, where there's a little more flexibility with the unrestricted state funding. So you will see we've lost about $400,000 in state funding from last year to this year. I've got a slide that'll kind of talk through that a little bit as we move forward with the presentation. Last two line items down here, just all other revenues. That's kind of the general pot that everything else goes into. So you can see we're projected to bring in about $33.5 million. I do want to clarify too that in this presentation, that when we're talking about the forecast, we're just talking about the general fund. So we do have other funds within the district, like our debt service fund that we use to pay the bond on the high school. We have a permanent improvement fund that we use for building projects and equipment, kind of large purchases, school buses, things like that. This is just dealing with the general fund and not any of those other funds that are associated with the district.
I think it's easy to see here that about half of our funding comes from the state,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
From the general fund.
Yep, it does. And you can also see that it's relatively flat, as it has been for a number of years.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of conversation around that flat funding and why doesn't the state fund the schools the way they should. We'll talk a little bit about why that happens in terms of the Fair School Funding Formula and how the state comes up with the amount of money they're going to give you on an annual basis. So notable revenue assumptions, again, this is kind of the why behind the numbers. So we have property tax collections are up due to the triennial update next year. The delinquent Rockies PUP payment, $393,000 that we received this fall. Again, we're anticipating another payment in the spring of '25. State funding decreased by approximately $400,000. So within that Fair School Funding Formula that Ohio is currently using, the two primary considerations they look at in a community are the AGI, which is adjusted gross income, and they also look at the property values. So when you look at a community like Ross, the incomes of the residents are going up, the property values are going up. Within the state formula, that means they're going to give you less money. So they have a term that they use called local capacity, and that is basically their way of looking and saying, this is how much we believe your community should be able to pay for your school district. And if you're not meeting that local capacity, they will lower your state funding and kind of force the issue for your community to increase the amount that they're paying towards the schools. Again, the income tax has been a really good thing for us. It continues to grow at approximately 2 to 3% per year. So that's kind of where we're at now through fiscal '25. Moving forward through '26 through '29, a couple important things that I put in bold up here. Legislative action to property tax laws and the 20 mil floor. So that's a really important thing right now. There's a lot of action at the state level where the legislature is looking at ways to potentially limit the amount of property tax increases that people are receiving throughout the state of Ohio. The reappraisal that happened, the update that happened in 2023, those were historic increases. When you look over time, most of the time that reappraisal value is going up 7%, 8%, 10%. In the Ross District, when that happened in 2023, it went up 39%. So those are historic increases, and we are going to see that process again here very soon, which is the second bullet point. It feels like it just ended. Don't shoot the messenger, but they're going to be doing a full real estate appraisal here in a little over 13 months. And we are hearing that a lot of counties in Ohio that are going through that reappraisal now are still seeing those large increases, 15, 20, 25% increases in valuation. So my personal opinion is I'm not sure the state is going to let that happen again when it comes to realizing those large reappraisal increases. So I think that's why there's a push at the state level to figure out some way to limit the growth of property taxes for the residents of Ohio. So that'll be something that we keep an eye on closely over the next couple of years. That's, again, a huge piece of our funding. When you talk about $10 million a year coming through in property taxes, if those stay stagnant or go down or don't grow at the level that we're accustomed to, that will definitely impact our overall financial picture. As Mr. Young mentioned, about $10 million a year of our funding comes from the state. So we are entering into a new biennium budget. So the state of Ohio does their budgets 2 years at a time. We're in the second year of that budget now. Be starting a new cycle for 2025 and 2026. That'll be interesting to see where that goes. So we're in the Fair School Funding Formula. When that was rolled out 4 years ago, the governor made a commitment to phase that in over a 6-year period of time. So the first 4 years, he has held true to that commitment. They phased in the first 2 years. When he introduced his last budget, they phased in the second 2 years. So now, in theory, we should be phasing in the final 2 years of the Fair School Funding Formula. What we are hearing from Columbus initially is that is going to be a real challenge. State revenues are down dramatically. In fact, I think Dr. Rice was at a seminar or some kind of conference not long ago where they essentially said if the governor were to fund the Fair School Funding Formula fully for the last 2 years, there would be no money left for any other state agencies. None in the entire state of Ohio. It would just go all to the schools. And I don't believe that that's going to happen. So we'll have to continue to see where the state budget goes. We probably won't know anything about that until the spring. Again, forecasts, things change. It's why we do it twice a year. We may have additional information that we can build into the May forecast when we do that presentation next spring. Income tax, we've seen steady growth there, 2 to 3% a year. We are seeing some school districts around the state that are seeing decreases in their earned income tax right now. I've talked to a few treasurers around the state that are seeing theirs go down. Some people think that might be the indication that a recession is coming. Who knows? We'll have to keep an eye on it. Ours is continuing to grow, which is a good thing for us, but that's something that we want to keep an eye on moving forward the next several years. The other thing to be aware of are our ADM, which is our average daily membership. That's a term that they use to determine how many students are in your school on a daily basis. We are seeing our district enrollment is dropping. And that's not just a Ross thing. Public school enrollment across the state of Ohio is dropping. May or may not have something to do with Ed Choice vouchers and expansion of those programs and more kids having the ability to go to private school. But that's something that we'll keep an eye on because that certainly does impact our funding as well, the amount of students that are physically in our district attending school every single day. So those are the revenue assumptions that we'll keep an eye on over the next several years and reflect in the forecasts that we present moving forward. Expenditure summary, again, similar format here, fiscal 25. Highlighted in the middle. We'll start at the bottom on this one. As you can see, our total expenditures for the year in the general fund are sitting right at about $31 million. It's important to remember that in a school district, we're not a business, we don't sell products, we're a people business. So the majority of our expenditures are up here in these first two lines, 3.010, 3.020. You can see out of the $31 million total in expenditures, our salaries and our retirement and insurance benefits make up about $25.5 million of that. So about 80+ % of our overall expenditures are salaries, retirement, and insurance benefits. The other line items in this expenditure category, purchase services. Those are services that we contract from things like the Butler County Educational Service Center. We hire and purchase contracts with school psychologists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, the services that our students receive in the school setting. It is much easier for us to be able to contract them through an agency like the ESC than it is to try to find and hire those individuals ourselves. If you are a school psychologist right now in Butler County, you can name your price. They're desperate for people. They don't have enough of them. So there are a lot of agencies we're able to contract, say, maybe like a 0.7. So we don't need someone every single day of the week. We need them 4 days a week. We're able to do that effectively through the Butler County ESC. The other line items here, supplies and materials, I think is relatively simple. Capital outlays, things like school buses. We can buy school buses with general fund dollars. We've avoided that so far, but we do have the ability to do that moving forward if we need to. And go down and see the other expense categories here. So again, all total, about $31 million in expenses for this fiscal year. $25.5 million of that being personnel services. Notable expenditure assumption, and this is kind of applying to this fiscal year. Staffing levels remaining flat. As I mentioned, we do not have, we're not seeing much growth in the district in terms of student enrollment. So the way this is forecasted in the document, it is looking at our staffing levels remaining flat. We don't have a bunch of new and additional positions built into the forecast moving forward either this year or the next several years. Annual increases in purchase services continue to rise, as I mentioned, special education services, school psychologists, things of that nature, those costs continue to go up. Those are things that we can't necessarily control. We have to have the services. We offer those services to our students, and we need to be able to contract with agencies to be able to do that. One big thing, a big win for the district over the last several years is this third bullet here, the health insurance savings. So if you remember a couple years ago, we opted out of the Butler Health Plan and went to an open market bid for insurance services. We signed a 3-year contract with Medical Mutual of Ohio. Within that 3-year contract, we received a 2% increase in our rate for the first year and a rate lock of a 0% increase for calendar year 25 and calendar year 26. So that's a good thing. That's a huge cost savings for our district. The last year we were in Butler Health Plan, our premiums went up 17.9% in 1 year. This year, Butler Health Plan, which we're not in anymore, their premiums went up about 11%. So they're still seeing those large increases. This is a huge win for us. It's a lot of transition. It's a new medical plan. There were definitely some gaps for our people in making that transition, but financially it was a good move for us. So we have that rate lock for the next 2 years, and we'll be out to bid in calendar year 27. Base salary increases. We signed a 2-year contract with the Ross Education Association last year, and that locked in a 4% increase in base pay 2 years ago, a 3% increase this year in fiscal 25, and we have built into the forecast a 2.5% estimate for fiscal years 26 through 29. It's also important to remember that the base increases are not the only thing that increases salaries. There's also steps built into our certified and classified schedules. So the average cost of those steps is about 2.1% annually. So it's important to add those numbers together. If you give a 3% increase in pay, you're also paying a 2.1% step. So that's overall a 5.1% increase. So that is how we build those numbers into the forecast. Future expenditure assumptions to look 3, 4, 5 years out. Again, staffing levels are projected as flat. We don't have additional new positions built into the forecast. The health insurance market bid, as we mentioned, in 27, we are projecting at least a 9% increase in our health insurance premium rates for 27, 28, and 29. And that's after the 3-year contract with Medical Mutual of Ohio ends. We have a meeting in a couple weeks to start looking at our claims data, and that'll give us a better idea as to whether or not that 9% is accurate or not. That could go up or down depending on how our claims data is looking. If our claims data is good, we go out into the marketplace. It makes us attractive to potential vendors that want to provide us with health insurance. We'll see where we're at, and then we can update that as necessary.
Do you have an idea on what percentage the health insurance costs are, as the overall expenditure budget? I mean, what percentage of the budget are we talking about here?
It's split. It's lumped in the forecast with the retirement
Yeah.
benefits, but it's probably we're 80% total, so it's probably at least 10% of the overall cost.
A big number.
Maybe more. I mean, if look at $7 million a year for health insurance and retirement benefits for all of our staff total. Salary schedule form, we are currently working with the Ross Education Association and a compensation committee to look at ways to rework our salary schedule to benefit both the district and our staff long term. Education has changed a lot in the last 15 to 20 years. STRS, I think, gave some good news this week by announcing that they're moving full retirement back to 33 years. Our current salary schedule has 18 steps. So if you think about that, you are years 18 through 33, so almost half your career. If you taught here your entire time, your entire career, you would not be receiving a step for about half the time. So we're working to kind of modernize that salary schedule. A lot of districts have done that in the last several years, and we're hoping we can move forward with a new schedule next year. Curriculum needs in FY 29 and 30. So one of the things that we used our ESSER dollars with several years ago was signing long-term contracts for curriculum, software subscriptions, all of those resources that our students use on a daily basis. So we were able to sign 5, 6, 7-year contracts in some cases using those ESSER dollars. Those contracts will now be coming to an end in 29 and 30. So we'll have to be very aware that we're building in the cost of renewing those items into future forecasts 4 or 5 or 6 years out. So Mrs. Doblinger has done a great job in the curriculum office of kind of planning for that. We've got that on the radar. We're able to kind of quantify how much we may need in those 2 fiscal years in order to renew all those subscriptions. But that's just something to keep on the radar as we move forward. All right, this slide kind of ties everything together. So I'm going to point out 2 or 3 different things here. So again, we're looking at fiscal 25, as you can see, our revenue a little over $33 million, our expenses $31 million. So that leaves us with a projected cash balance of about $8.2 million. You can see that that is up from last year's ending cash balance. The $6.191 million is what we actually ended the year with. It's an ending cash balance last year. And you can also see, looking back a couple years, that is a significant increase over where we were at in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. So again, two primary reasons. We made a tremendous amount of cuts, a lot of things that we did to save money over the last several years, and then tie that in with the property reevaluation, which increased the amount of property tax dollars we're receiving, allows us to carry a hefty cash balance at the end of 25. So this last line, this true days cash, as you can see down here, the state recommends that you carry at least 60 days. And that's essentially, the world stops tomorrow, you got to run the district for 60 days. How much money does that cost? Well, in our case, we've got enough money here that we could run the school district for 96 days. You can see we were above 60 for the last couple of years, jumped a little bit last year to 75, up to 96. Well, I'll say this again, when you're looking at a forecast, you've heard me talk about all these assumptions and things. Well, this could happen. We got this bid or that bid, or it could happen. When you're looking at a forecast, it's really important to look at the current year that you're in and the next year a little bit. We can be relatively sure about our revenue, our expenses within the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year. You start getting out into here, into 26, 27, there's far too many variables to be able to accurately project what may or may not happen. So again, it's a snapshot. This is the best guess we have based on the information we have today of what things might look like in the year 2030. Very difficult to project out that far. The last thing on this slide that I'll point out is the reason the cash balance starts to deflate a little bit projected in the several years moving out of the forecast. It's because you can see we're projected to start deficit spending next year. So right now, in the last 4 years, our revenue has exceeded our expenses. $2 million there, just barely there, about $1 million last year. Now we're projected for our revenue to exceed our expenses about $2 million this year. Next year, that flips and we start spending a little bit more than we're bringing in. So if that trend holds true, that's what eats into that savings account. That's what eats into that cash balance. So you can see that balance stays relatively consistent for the next year, and as you move forward, that deficit spending gets bigger and bigger to the point where it's eating into your cash balance. So the good thing is we don't have to hit the panic button right now. There's nothing to worry about in this year or next year. And again, we have a lot of variables out here that can and will change before we know exactly what these 27, 28, and 29 are moving forward. So we're in a solid financial ground here for the next couple of years. Very confident that we're in a good spot. And then as we get more information, we'll update future forecasts and be able to more accurately project what these years 27, 28, and 29 look like moving forward. So again, we do 2 forecasts a year, so you can see a couple of the significant changes from the May forecast that I presented last year and the November forecast that I'm presenting now. With the new information, the changes that we received from the state, our revenue was up about 1.2 million. Our expenses were also up by about 500,000. So those were the primary changes. Those revenue increases were due to that delinquent tax payment, and then some other revenues like Medicaid reimbursement, interest income. Those have all been up this year, which caused that total revenue number to jump from where we forecasted it in May. On the expenditure side, expenditures are up, and that's due to personnel and purchase services primarily. But again, that's pretty close. When you're talking about $31 million worth of expenditures, you're looking at about a $500,000 gap. That's pretty close. Cash balance is up about $900,000. We projected it to be at the end of this year in May, 7.3 million. Now we're saying it's probably going to be closer to 8.2. That number will change again when we do the May forecast and we get a little closer to the end of the fiscal year and can actually project, drill down a little bit closer to where we're going to be. The last slide that I have, just a summary of a few bullet points here. The increased revenue from the tax year 23 valuation helps our revenue outpace our expenses for 2025. Valuation and adjusted gross income increase causes a loss of $470,000 annually in state funding based on the funding formula. That term I used before, local capacity, continues to increase in the eyes of the state formula. As your community income goes up, as your community property values go up, the state's going to reduce the amount of funding they give you because they think your local capacity is higher. Within this forecast, revenue growth is projected at 1.85% a year, and our expenses are expected to grow at 5.15%. And that's what eats into that cash balance when your revenue is not growing as fast as your expenses. Assumptions show deficit spending begins in fiscal 26, would be next year. And that's just slight deficit spending. We'll see where that shakes out in May, and then put a game plan together, as we look into 27, 28, and 29. And I know I've said it a couple times, staffing expenses will continue to be the driver of costs. It's about 80-ish% of our overall expenses are salaries, benefits, and retirement. So that is our November 5-year forecast.
Great. Anyone have any questions? Audience included?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Castater. Well done. Okay, Mrs. Webb's not here to give us our legislative report tonight. Anyone have anything at all regarding
Are
that?
they even meeting? Are they in session? Are they
No.
doing anything?
No, not really. I think it's a lame duck.
I'd like to know what their
Who's lined up?
cost per day, how many days a year they actually do something.
Well, you don't want to know that.
I do.
You don't want to be ill, do you? I will say that I attended the group that's working on the new school formula.
Yep.
And they talked about the same thing you mentioned, Mr. Castater, and that was their concern and the push from the Ohio School Board Association point of view is there's got to be a big push to have them fully fund years 5 and 6 of that formula.
Correct.
And they talked, they had a panel of their group, and that was their big number one push.
Right.
Was going to be that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have $7 billion sitting in a rainy day.
Right.
I don't know what qualifies as a rainy day.
Right.
You know,
Educating students would, in my opinion.
yeah. All right, Butler Tech report.
All right, it's going to be pretty short. We went into an executive session at the start to talk about personnel and one at the end. There were no presentations. It was just normal financial reports and so forth. Probably the biggest news to come out of it, though, was, I don't know if it's in today's journal or it'll be tomorrow, Mr. Graff is going to retire and come back in a strategic advisor position to work on the VORA space, the Middletown Airport, and a bioscience as an advisor. And we're going to be conducting a search for a new superintendent. We are going to look at a couple of internal candidates before it's posted outside of Butler Tech, and then if we don't come to a decision internally, they're going to post it and hire a search firm and go on a search for the next superintendent at Butler Tech. So that's all I have.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so time of the meeting for public comment. We have 2 forms that were filled out of persons that wanted to address the board. The first person is Faith McAlpin. Faith wants to present her government project tonight. It consists of my personal experiences with chronic illness, research about the effects of illness on teens, and a proposal for added support for those types of raw students. So the floor is yours. You have about 5 minutes.
Hello, I am Faith McAlpin, a junior at Ross High School. Before I begin, I want to thank you all for your time and for allowing me to present my project. I want to make our high school even better, especially for those with chronic illnesses. Many students struggle during high school, often juggling challenging academics with multiple time-consuming extracurriculars. In the New York Times article, What Students Are Saying About the Demands of High School, student Serafina said, "I feel like I have not allowed myself to be a child and enjoy my teenage years because of the need to get good grades and set myself up for the future." High school is already a grueling feat, and having chronic illnesses severely impacts the student experience and possible achievements. This past October, I created a survey asking RHS students about their experiences with chronic illness. Around 25% said they suffer from one, and the majority said they have friends or family who do as well. Responses varied, but the common theme was that friends and family struggled to support and empathize with affected students. Empathy and belonging are vital for students struggling with illnesses for long periods of time. Ever since January of this year, I have suffered from daily chronic migraines. My symptoms include continuous and stabbing eye and head pain, but the rigorous treatments and medications I have had minimal effect. From March to the end of the past school year, I was home and hospital bound. I could barely function like a normal human being, much less participate in school, homework, fun, and just life overall. The severe pain and lengthy amount of time away from my peers impacted my mental health, worsening my pre-existing depression. It was as if everybody had moved on while I was forced to stay inside, becoming lonely. The support from the school staff was and continues to be great, but the frequent struggle with maintaining relationships and grades feels impossible. My weekly routine consists of many doctor's appointments to preserve my mental and physical health. In addition, I lost most of my friends, mainly because I was not healthy enough to attend school or spend time doing the things I enjoy with the people I love. According to the Better Health Channel, chronic illnesses have a major effect on children in their schooling, often by causing difficulty in completing work, maintaining relationships with school friends, decreased academic performance and grades, and a lack of confidence and motivation. This can include possible body image or self-esteem issues. I was not myself anymore, and I did not recognize the girl I saw in the mirror. All I wanted was to feel normal, but most of all, just to have a friend. Somebody my age who could understand my present needs and be there for me. This is why I am proposing additional and student-led support, either by group or other means, to help fellow students deal with all the difficulties that come with chronic illnesses. It is nearly impossible to find others who can truly understand the effects of chronic diseases, especially in the younger demographic. However, no child deserves to go through these hardships alone. I have researched Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and they offer workshops and interactive programs on various mental health and wellness-related topics. We can also start on a smaller scale, like having students support groups or clubs where they can talk about their struggles and get help from other kids in similar situations. There have been previous counselor-ran groups like this at Ross, except for grief and anger issues. I believe that bringing these back will provide a safe space for students with chronic illnesses to explore if needed. Students need options they can explore, a support system with peers going through similar experiences. connections with others who can truly grant them understanding and belonging. This group would welcome individuals with open arms when they feel all hope is lost. If I had programs like these in place for the past 11 months, it would have made all the difference. I sincerely appreciate your thoughts on building and furthering a support system for the many students who need and deserve it in the Ross community. Thank you again for all your time and consideration, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So your recommendation would be to create a support group at the high school to support students who have chronic illnesses?
Yes.
Okay. Have you presented that to any of the people at the high school, the principal or counselors?
I have not.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
I'll help you with that. I'll have a conversation with Mr. Martin.
Like I said, we can start small and just have this be run by the counselor or students. I just think it would be really helpful and beneficial for it to be ran by students and just to have that person connection.
What grade are you in again?
I'm a junior.
You're a junior, okay, good. Well, maybe something like that can be happen, and hopefully you'll be able to get back to school and get things wrapped up.
Thank you for sharing.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. Appreciate your concern. Okay, our next person is Sarah Emmenacker, and she's going to be talking about changing the time of extended RAM bell and getting rid of early releases.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Emmenacker, and I'm a junior at Ross High School. I would first like to thank you guys for allowing me to speak on my ideas and just for being here to listen. Today, I'm here to discuss my ideas on changing the extended RAM bell time. Currently, extended RAM bell takes place every Wednesday and Thursday in between second and third block. This time allows students to get caught up on homework, study, and get additional help from teachers. Extended RAM bell also helps students get closer with the homeroom teachers and their peers through the mental health activities that are provided by the state. While extended RAM bell currently is great, there are a few issues. One of the main issues is that students don't have all of their homework because RAM bell is in between second and third block. Extended RAM bell is meant to be a time for students to get ahead on their homework and study. However, some students are unable to accomplish that due to having easier first block classes or having late arrival. I conducted a poll from both students and teachers, and many agreed that extended RAM bell could be productive at times, but that they can't always get everything done because they don't have all of their homework assigned. Another issue right now is that many students, mainly freshmen and sophomores, have to rush to their lockers and buses at the end of the day due to the short bus waiting periods. My proposal is that we move extended RAM bell to the end of the day and we only allow late arrival. An advantage of this would be that students would have time to go to their lockers and get additional help from teachers if needed before having to leave for the buses. Another benefit is that students would have all of their homework so they can start completing it. I propose only allowing late arrival because getting rid of early release decreases the amount of driving students must do, because many students who have early release will leave school and then have to come back later because they participate in extracurriculars and sports. Getting rid of early release would also decrease the amount of traffic in the mornings when it's dark, increasing the safety of students and others on the road. Some may argue that extended RAM bell should stay in the middle of the day to allow students to have a break, but we already have lunch for that. People will also argue that moving extended RAM bell will make lunch too early, but lunch would only be earlier by approximately 30 minutes, and students would already be at school for over 3 hours. People also mentioned that the reason we have been looking at getting rid of late arrival currently instead of early dismissal is because data has shown that late arrival has increased the amounts of tardies in students, and early release allows for students to go to jobs or have extracurriculars activities outside of school. And while that is true, the safety of students should be the school's #1 priority. Allowing students to arrive late decreases the risk of traffic incidents due to there being less people on the road, and it helps students get more sleep. Sleep is very important for teenagers, and last year we even had a student incident where a student crashed into a bus because they fell asleep at the wheel. In conclusion, I think that extended ramp-up should be moved to the end of the day, and we should only allow for late arrival. Does anyone have any questions or concerns?
Have you brought this concern and proposal to your principal?
Yes, he was one of the people that I interviewed, along with 3 other teachers, and he agrees that, he wants to get rid of either late arrival or early release anyway. The only really reason we plan on he wanted to do early release was because of the tardies, but like I said, safety and everything. And then for the extended rambo, he is open to it, and he just wants to do whatever he thinks will be best for his students.
Okay.
Currently, I was going to say, currently, the extended RAM bell, that is only, I believe, 2 days a week?
Yes, Wednesday and Thursday.
Okay. And you're not proposing changing that, you're just saying keep
Yes.
Wednesdays and Thursdays the extended RAM bell?
Yes, just move it to the end of the day.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I'm sure there'll be some follow-up with Mr. Kleinfelder about that proposal.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, both students, for your input. We value that very much. Okay, let's move on to superintendent's reports and recommendations.
Yes, thank you. First item I have for a recommendation is the online day plan. Thinking back to a policy that we actually will vote on early or later today, we have something that we're out of compliance for. This actually needs to be passed by August 1st, so we'll get on that and start doing that each year. But this is for, if you remember back to that policy we talked about last month, the world shuts down, we use all of our calamity days. This is, we've been out of school for weeks upon a time now. This puts into place what's called asynchronous learning for students, where teachers will be on a computer engaged with students. So think back to when we had the pandemic, where we did a little bit of that. We did synchronous and asynchronous. This is putting teachers in front of students. So we have to develop this plan each year. It has to go through the REA. They have to sign off on it. It'll just be a matter of updating it from here on by August 1st each and every year. So that's letter A. Letter B are several overnight field trip proposals. There are 3 for show choir, and there are 2 for wrestling, 1 for the female wrestling team, 1 for the male wrestling team. Letter C is an indoor track request. This is a unique one we learned about the last couple of weeks. It is not a OHSSA sport. So in order for them to be, these few athletes that participate in indoor track, in order for them to be allowed to participate, the board has to essentially say, yes, they do represent Ross High School. So that's really all that is there. That way they can go under our insurance policy. They're covered as athletes. Our coaches that coach track, outdoor track, are the ones that will be responsible for them. For this
The
indoor
coaches
track
will
season.
be attending the meets with them?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And then letter D, what we talked about earlier, the expulsion appeal designee. Letter E then is the policy approval from last time as well.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to approve items A through E as outlined by Dr. Rice?
I'll make the motion.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, we call the roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Kleinfelder,
Yes.
Mr. Gunther,
Yes.
Mr. Beckman,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes, motion passes.
Next item I have is item F, personnel. That is number 1, employment, number 2, supplementals and stipends, And number 3, leaves. There are no new positions added on tonight's personnel.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the personnel recommendations?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Gunther?
Yes.
Mr. Beckman?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelder?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to treasurer's reports and recommendations.
Yes, I have letters A through G tonight. We'll start with the donations. One item of note on donations is that we had one of our food service employees at the middle school entered the district into an online contest and actually won over $30,000 worth of industrial kitchen equipment. So we are approving those 3 items tonight as a donation, and then we'll be receiving those items here in December or January. So pretty cool thing for the district to get $30,000 worth of free equipment from a contest.
And let's mention her name.
Anita McConnell
All right.
at the middle school.
Kudos.
Yeah, kudos to Anita, yep. Also have our red tree investment report, our treasurer's report, the cash summary, and then the general fund. Letter D is the creation of a new cash account tonight. We've been receiving some donations in memory of Mrs. Pelton, who tragically passed away last spring at the middle school. So initially we're putting some of those into the middle school principals fund. We're going to create a new fund for that. And those are designated for use by the science department at Ross Middle School. So we've been working with the science teachers there to purchase materials, supplies, things of that nature. So we're creating a new fund to be able to track those receipts and expenses. As I mentioned earlier, the contract for the website that will be starting up in January. Our current provider is making a bunch of changes to their platform that's going to make it cost prohibitive for us to continue to move on with them. We weren't necessarily happy with the product anyway. So this is a new company that offers a much better service and a lot of different communication tools we can use with our families through the website and an app and things like that. Approval of the 5-year forecast, and then the last thing is the district mowing contract, which is a 3-year contract for mowing services around the school. We did bid those services out in September. In late September, we bid those services out, and that is the actual contract with the vendor that we would be approving tonight. So letters A through G.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve items A through G?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on any of those items? Okay, hearing none, you can call the roll, please.
Yes. Mr. Beckman?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelder?
Yes.
Mr. Gunther?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes. The motion passes. Okay, board committees, do we have any meetings of the facilities or finance committees?
Did have a finance committee last week. Steve pretty much presented that, so kind
Oh,
of.
Basically went through
okay.
the forecast.
So, yeah, it's a review of
Okay.
that in a lot of detail, so.
Yeah, you're off the hook.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm off the hook this month.
Great. I did want to take a minute just to give an opportunity for the persons who attended the Ohio School Board Association convention to share any information they picked up that might be of interest. So, Mr. Kleinfelder,
Yeah, I
anything
went
you'd
to,
like to mention?
One on principal leadership, that wasn't that good. Went with Steve on one on AI. They had a superintendent, an assistant superintendent, and they were working through some AI applications. Actually took the state report card data for the whole state, uploaded that into AI program, the state workbook, and an explanation guide for all that information, and then started creating real-time tweets, Instagram posts, how their district compared. They put in criteria such as how did we compare with groups similar within $3,000 of our spending per pupil, and it started spitting out all this information. It did a podcast and had two very human-like voices, a man and a woman, actually, that they could post on their website, a podcast of going over this information. It was really kind of scary in some ways. But that was very interesting. It was interesting that they were doing all this, but they banned their students, had no access on their networks. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then I went to another one, I think Emily was in that session, where one of the districts actually, when they had student work that was generated or used AI, had 3 levels. They had to indicate whether it was a 0, they didn't use AI at all. Level 1 was they used AI somewhat to research, and then level 3, they used a lot of AI and probably very little student work. And they were coming up with a rubric of how to grade essays and things like that based on that criteria. So it's kind of interesting. That was probably the best ones that I went to.
Yeah, I also attended, and I was in a couple with Steve. We talked about the funding formulas with the state of Ohio, a lot of the funding issues, some different things there. Very enlightening. I also attended 1 or 2 classes that were kind of geared for newer board members. It was kind of going over some of the do's and don'ts. As a board member, as an employee of the district, there was a lot of good information in there. It was kind of entertaining. One, we had a mock board meeting, and it was pretty much set up so that the people participating were basically doing everything they could possibly do wrong, just to highlight things that you're not supposed to do, and then kind of elaborate and touch on what you should be doing as a board member. So, again, there was a lot of great classes there. That there's so many classes you really don't have an opportunity to get to all of them, but some of the sessions were pretty good. I had one. It was kind of a sales pitch session, so wasn't really much interested in that. So, but other than that, I think it was a good experience.
Good, great. I already mentioned the school funding work group that I attended, which was helpful. I also attended a session to board members' role in budget planning, which was interesting as we move forward with the budget and what school board members need to be involved in terms of helping us understand, I guess, the budget planning process. I also went to a session on AI. That was, I think a lot of people were interested in that. And I'm just wondering if maybe in the near future we could have a report from the district regarding where are we with AI, how are we integrating artificial intelligence in our classrooms and student work as well.
Yeah, very timely, something that's definitely on the horizon. Ms. Doblinger and Mr. Baker are working on. We don't have any policy that touches upon it, and I think we need to start there. So we're studying what other districts have done and have not done. I actually met with a student group from the middle school that would like to speak to the board next at the December meeting with their thoughts on AI and how it can be beneficial to students in the classroom. So we went through their presentation, and they'll be presenting that in December. So I anticipate in the next couple of months we'll have a lot to say here at the board.
Great. Well, I know that we could definitely use the districts that presented, probably would be good to contact in terms of what they're doing. I know the one that I attended, the district actually, you mentioned the district said they were kind of blocking students from using it. This district kind of went the different direction and did not do that, and are actually working with the staff and the students on how to make it work for the benefit of the teachers and students both. Because their initial knee-jerk reaction was, we got to block all this stuff. Right. Then as they worked through it and talked through it, now, they had to bring everybody on board. They talked a lot about bringing the teachers on board with it, and a lot of training that was involved there. But so, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Anything you wanted to share that you went to?
Yeah, no, I think Eric did a good job summarizing. I went to several financial sessions, and the AI session was mind-blowing as well. Listening to them generate a podcast that was 20 minutes long, that when they entered in the information, it took about 30 seconds for that thing to be generated. And it sounded like two people talking back and forth. Oh, we exceeded achievement here, and look at us compared to this district. I'm thinking, this is unbelievable that a computer program can actually generate something like that quickly. So it was, yeah, definitely something that we're going to have to get our arms around. It's going to get out of control really quick.
Anything, Dr. Rice, you want to share?
I'm a political and policy nerd, so I try to stick to the policies and the legislature. I'm always just interested to hear what Columbus is planning for us, so I always stick to sessions about those.
Okay, well, that sounds like your job. doesn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. Figure out what they're going to tell us to do next.
All right. Any other business to come for the board this evening? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Kleinfelder?
Yes.
Mr. Beckman?
Yes.
Mr. Gunther?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes. And the board will come out of executive session and will be no further business. So you may be confident you can leave. Thank you.